Okay, so we have some really interesting news for the Acolyte. Now, I know there's been controversy surrounding this show outside of the show itself, but in spite of that, I can't help but be so excited about a show that centers around the Sith and the dark side of the Force. Because look, if you're like me and you grew up during the prequel trilogy era, we had so many reference books that talked about the powers of the Sith. We were obsessed with that stuff. The lore surrounding Palpatine, when he mentions Darth Plagueis in Revenge of the Sith, we were all so curious to learn more. So of course when the James Luceno book came out, that satisfied a huge itch. That book was not canon though, and in canon, we don't really know too much about them. We understand some of their doctrines, we can certainly make deductions based on Darth Sidious and Vader, Maul, but we don't know as much as what the Acolyte is going to give us. So when it comes to the Acolyte, for many of us who love the Sith, this show really sounds up our alley. So I'm giving it a chance, and when it comes out, we'll judge it then. The first live-action High Republic show. And look, you've probably heard there have been comments made by Leslye Headland, but I'm setting all of that aside when it comes to the substance and excitement I have for this series. There are so many other awesome creatives of the show, and just like anything, I don't want to prejudge. I don't want to go in with a negative outlook. I really think if done right, this has a lot of potential, and bear in mind those who saw the celebration footage did say it looked really incredible. But this is interesting. Lucasfilm have provided a new doctrine and twist for the Sith ahead of the 2024 Disney Plus series. Until now, the understanding as fans that we have regarding the Sith is in many ways they're the inverse of the Jedi, implying the Sith know that they're evil, but they have more freedom with their basic desires in the Force. For the most part in most eras, and I will say most, not all, they're not as doctrinal as the Jedi. They love the power of the dark side and the power the Force gives them in return. But during Luke Skywalker's latest encounter with a Sith Lord, it seems as though Star Wars is giving Sith doctrine a new twist. And even though this point in the timeline is hundreds of years after the events of the High Republic, and therefore the Acolyte, it is relevant because it seems to be deliberately tying it in, and it sounds as though Star Wars is building this up in such a way that we understand more about the Sith before the show drops. The Acolyte is going to be 8 episodes long, set to premiere next year. We're going to get a better insight canonically of dark side teachings, what it's like to be a dark side user and the struggles that come with it.
Anakin's gone. I am what remains.
The most obvious example is Anakin's fall to Darth Vader. In Legends, we see this in Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, the Darth Plagueis novel as I mentioned earlier, Revenge of the Sith novelization, but this comic with Luke canonizes something we didn't really know too much about regarding the Sith doctrine, something the Acolyte is probably also going to explore, some of the better aspects of tapping into the dark side, the pleasurable aspects. Luke has a Sith encounter, and she tells him she likes the way the dark side feels, and that any attempt to quote heal them with the light side is seen as violence and not something they want. So this comic is proving the dark side is not just fear, anger, hate, and in the case of Vader and others, suffering. It's more than that. It's an addictive feeling, which is very similar to the way Palpatine portrays himself. The way he sells the dark side to Anakin in episode 3 really sounds as though he enjoys the way it feels, whether it's unlimited power or the way he says, "I can feel your anger. It gives you focus." There's almost like an addictive quality to it that's drawn him in, that's flooded his senses. This is in Star Wars issue number 35 by Charles Soule, and Luke tries to purify a red Kyber crystal, at which point he feels the dark side energy of the bled crystal, and his mind falls into the crystal itself. Inside the red Kyber crystals sat the Sith from times of old who first bled the crystal. They're sitting on a throne of sorts, surrounded by other dark side users with symbols of the Sith Eternal. Luke tells the Sith that he was trying to heal the red Kyber crystal, almost like he's offering to do them a favor by doing this. But the Sith is amused. She laughs, saying that Luke was assuredly told he would find nothing within the Kyber crystal but pain and suffering. This Sith insists there is nothing that needs healing, and even tells Luke that any attempt to do so with the light side is futile. It's a form of violence. It's not what they want, and this introduces a very interesting paradigm with what we associate as the Force. The dark side has always been considered bad, the light side is good, and any Sith who actively chooses the dark side must be suffering and in pain. So does this perspective break canon? Well, yes and no. As I say, most of our understanding of the Sith comes from the expanded universe. In the novel Shadows of the Empire, they establish that feeling any kind of pleasure or joy weakens a Sith connection to the dark side. Some Sith fell in love, and that's going to be a big part of the Acolyte as well, but you could argue there is a difference between joy and happiness and the euphoria from addiction to the dark side. Their quest for rulership and power overtakes them. And while this is true to some extent for some dark side users, we now know the frame of minds the Jedi have about the Sith, the point of view, is wrong. This version is enlightening, and we could see it in the Acolyte, the appeal of the dark side. Because even though we've had hints of this, as I say, in Revenge of the Sith, it was from Palpatine's position trying to lure Anakin to the dark side with the promise of saving Padme, which he didn't do. But what about a different perspective? What if the Sith code and tapping into the dark side is exactly the thing that could be someone's salvation, even if it's not the narrative you hear from the light side of the Force? And in a very interesting way, it reframes Darth Tenebrous, Darth Plagueis, and Darth Sidious. That line of Sith tended to not mind the pain. In fact, they embraced it for anger. Not to mention Plagueis' obsession with immortality, which he passed down to Emperor Palpatine. But there's a freedom that comes with the power. But it does make sense. If the Jedi were considered to limit themselves, the Sith push themselves further and further emotionally. They don't repress their feelings, they embrace them, the good and the bad. And just as Palpatine said, good is a point of view. Share your thoughts on this and everything we spoke about in the comments down below. In other Star Wars news, we have some interesting updates by the developers for Star Wars Outlaws. In a newly published interview on GameSpot.com with some Star Wars Outlaws developers, some new details about the game's characters and plot were dished out. Game director Matthias Carlson and narrative director Naveed Kavari talked more about the new game, the highly anticipated open-world Ubisoft game. Here's what they said. The beauty of having a character like Kay Vess is this is her first step into the underworld, and we're experiencing that alongside her. One of the things we always talk about as a team is putting ourselves in the mind of Kay and how she acts. She's not perfect, she hasn't figured everything out yet, and that feels great. That feels natural and fresh in what we're trying to do. And so, being able to go into that journey with her, to watch her navigate the underworld and have that experience where you're learning it alongside her, it feels great. And this is exciting for a lot of reasons, because she's going to learn through those around her, smugglers, scoundrels, and that introduces the possibility of so many characters too. We know for sure that Han Solo's going to be in it, the Pike Syndicate. This also opens up the possibility of Kira, and they go on to say, quote, Kay is a bit of a loner. She's grown up having to do everything herself, having to survive herself, and Nyx is almost a part of her armor. It's her only family, it's a support system, and I think it's great when it translates from story to gameplay as well. And I've got to say guys, the gameplay looks fantastic. I think Nyx is adorable. I've seen some fans say he's cuter than Grogu. I disagree. For me, Grogu and R2-D2 always get that top spot. But Nyx is adorable as well, and the developers tease he's more important than you know, because he is the catalyst in her ability to do certain things, not just in the setting of missions, but also her confidence. And it just goes to show, if you're a scoundrel, if you're a smuggler, if you're exploring the galaxy alone, you need a companion, whether it's a droid, a Wookiee, whatever it is, an axolotl-looking creature like Nyx. You can't always do it alone. And another exciting tease, they say action and consequence is pervasive in the experience. The decisions you make and actions you take are going to have an impact on your relationship with the different factions, creating threats and opportunities, so everyone's experience is going to be different playing this game, and that's something Star Wars fans absolutely love. I think Star Wars Eclipse also promises that kind of thing, but that game is much further out. This is just around the corner coming next year. I loved the trailer and then the gameplay footage, really excited for this. Share your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video my dear friends, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.